We're talking about movies. Rev up those toxic comments, because today we're talking about Star Wars. My rank of all the live action films ranked 11 to 1. Now, to show my bias, Star Wars is my favorite franchise ever created. I've been watching it since I was a kid. I think George Lucas is a genius. I think it's the greatest story ever told. And with that being said, I think George Lucas's sale of Star Wars to Disney is one of the worst things that has ever happened. And I'm sure you'll be able to tell that with my list. I don't want this to get into a huge rant. I'm going to try to keep my comments on each movie short, but I try to turn this not into a huge rant. But here we go with my list of all 11 live action Star Wars films ranked 11 to 1. So I think the bottom two are pretty easily the bottom two. Like there's a kind of a gap between them. One of these two had to be last, so I'm going to go number 11 with Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Now, this movie, I think, is a garbage film from a filmmaking standpoint and a Star Wars standpoint. Basically, there is not really a lot of plot to this movie. It's basically go here, go there, go here, go there. And it's like MacGuffin the movie. It's like stuff that they have to go get and apply to a different situation wouldn't make sense. Like they find this stupid dagger that they line up perfectly. But why would the wreckage that fell from the sky line up perfectly in the exact spot they're standing with this dagger? It's just really stupid. I think the Force teleporting thing that they introduced in this movie is beyond dumb and doesn't make sense. Back in the original trilogy, the Force was you could push things, you can like move things, and now they're like you can have a lightsaber fight with someone that's in a different location with you. Really stupid in my opinion. I think the stuff that they do with like Rey Skywalker is really dumb. And bringing back the Emperor, I thought would be good, but it was terrible. And what made it worse was they didn't even attempt to explain it. I think that they knew they didn't have a good explanation for it, so they just didn't even try to explain it. If I am going to say something positive about this movie, it was nice to see Billy D. Williams back as Lando, but I don't know why he wasn't in the entire trilogy. I don't know why they waited until the last one to put him in. But yeah, I did not find this film to be good filmmaking-wise or Star Wars-wise, so it is last on my list. I know it's kind of the popular thing to put The Last Jedi as last on most people's list, but the reason I'm going to put it at 10 instead of 11 is I thought that the movie itself is not a poor made movie. I've said before, Rian Johnson is a good filmmaker and I like his stuff. I think that this is a bad Star Wars movie. And I think that where he went wrong with this was he knew what Star Wars fans wanted. He knew they wanted to see Luke fighting and all this stuff. And I think he said, how can I subvert those expectations and change that? I think that was a huge misstep on his part. I think that he should have given the people what they wanted. That doesn't mean you have to let the fans write the movie. But leaving Luke on the island the entire time in this movie was a terrible choice. Even at the end when they do the whole fake out with him, which was kind of cool, you don't have to kill him. You could leave him alive for Episode 9 and see where it goes. The reason I think that the sequel trilogy went so far off the rails is because they had no plan. So once Rian Johnson made this movie and everybody hated it, then Episode 9 became terrible because then J.J. Abrams tried to rework it back into something it wasn't meant to be. That really is the whole fall of the sequel trilogy, is they had no idea, no plan going into it. It seemed like a mindless cash grab to me where they knew they had Star Wars, they could slap a label on it and people would pay to go see it. But they needed to have more of a concrete idea of what they wanted to do story-wise. George even said a lot of the ideas they had in the sequel trilogy was just copy and paste of the original trilogy. So Last Jedi, I'll say, is not a horribly made film from a filmmaking standpoint. I'll give Rian Johnson credit on that. But the entire plot with Rose and Finn going off on the casino planet was really dumb. It was nice to see Luke back, but it fell short in a lot of ways that people had expectations to live up to it. And I think you can't leave Luke alone on the island the entire time. You got to get him off it. And I think that's where this film falls short. Number 9, I'm going to go with Solo. Now, this is not a movie I think is a bad movie. I just think it's pointless. There was no need to cast a young Han Solo when Harrison Ford is still alive and you just had him in Episode 7. The movie, like I said, is not bad. It just, there's no real point to it. I think it's really dumb, them saying that his real name is not Han Solo. And that he got it from a guard or something. It's cool to see like young Lando, young Chewie, and the story's good. It's just really pointless, and I don't really see a lot of reason of why they made it, and it didn't do very well financially. Having Darth Maul in it at the end was pretty cool, but again, it's never going to go anywhere because they're never going to make a sequel. But that was just kind of a cool tidbit to throw in. So again, good movie, just kind of pointless. Number 8, I'm going to go Rogue One. Now, this is actually a very good movie. The plot is very good, the story is very good, and K2SO is a standout. He's a really funny droid. I think that the movie did get saved by Tony Gilroy coming in and rewriting it. A lot of people don't know that the director was actually kind of yanked from it, and they had a guy come in and rewrite it because it was kind of falling apart at the end. But this is probably, honestly, the best Disney movie that they've made. I have Force Awakens ranked higher for reasons I'll explain in a second. But I think that the story of this one is really good. The Darth Vader scene at the end is awesome. That again, could probably put it up, just having him wrecking shop in the hallway. I think it's a very good movie. I do tend to like the Force side of Star Wars more, with like the lightsabers and everything. And this one, it tends to focus more on the ground troops and everything. So that's one reason why I have it ranked where I have it. So number 7, I'll give it to Episode 7 of Force Awakens. I can admit Rogue One is probably a better film. But my thing with Episode 7 that I'll give it to is having Han back on screen for the first time in over 30 years was pretty great. Harrison Ford saves this movie. I do think it is a crime that they never had Luke, Han, and Leia on screen together. And obviously the passing of Carrie Fisher made that impossible going down the road if they wanted to do that. But I don't know why you wouldn't do it in the first movie that you've had in, over 30 years. I like the Force aspect of this one a little more than Rogue One, as I said. The movie, though, is an exact copy of A New Hope. They take no chances. Even George has said, like, there's nothing new. That's my thing with the sequel trilogy also. They knew making this movie that they wanted to make it basically the exact copy of the original trilogy for Episode 7, so as many people would go see it. There's nothing new in it. There's no new chances. But like I said, it's nice to see Han back. It's nice to see Chewie back. If at the end, when that lightsaber flew through the snow, if Luke caught it instead of Rey, that would have been so much better. Luke isn't in this movie a lot either, which is kind of silly. But yeah, so it's not, this is the best of the sequel trilogy films, but it also takes no new chances. It does set up Episode 8 and 9 really well, but since Episodes 8 and 9 then fell flat, it kind of negates that. So I think that at the time, it was a very safe move for Disney, but it ends up not being a very original or exciting movie in the end. Number 6, I got Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Now, these are the ones I consider to be really actual Star Wars, like canon Star Wars. George made them, the creator. This came from him. It didn't come from other people writing fan fiction. I think that this movie is good, especially when you get into like the investigation that Obi-Wan is doing into Jango Fett, finding the clone army, trying to track down who's trying to kill Padme. That whole part of it is good. Mullet Obi-Wan, by the way, it's just pretty dope. I know the complaints about the dialogue. I get it. Anakin doesn't like sand. I saw these movies as a kid and never did that bother me. So now, as I'm grown up, it does not bother me still. I can recognize, like, okay, sometimes they say some silly stuff, but it matters zero to me. I think the movie's very good. I will say I have it lower than the other prequel movies because I hold the fight at the end between Obi-Wan and Anakin, and then eventually Yoda and Dooku, in a lot lower regard than I do the fight between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and then the Anakin Obi-Wan fight in Revenge of the Sith. So I'd still like this movie a lot. The stuff with Jango, as I said, is really cool. It's just that some of the other stuff in the other movies I find to be better and more exciting. Number 5, I got Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. I think that Qui-Gon is great in this movie, played by Liam Neeson. A lot of people complain about him not having character. I think he's awesome. He's a great Jedi, where he doesn't just fall in line with what the Jedi want to do. He kind of has his own ideas of what's right and what's wrong. The pod racing scene in this movie is awesome. Then another thing, like I said with the dialogue Attack of the Clones, I'll give you that a lot of people don't like Jar Jar, but again, seeing it as a kid, Jar Jar did not bother me. It's like what George said. Breaking news, these movies were made for kids. They're not made for 40-year-old grown men that want to criticize or critique everything. So growing up seeing these as a child, like Jar Jar did not bother me. Then you get to the fight at the end between Darth Maul, Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan, and that is just epic cinema. That's another thing with these. The Disney trilogy is not epic. When they have lightsaber fights, they do not have like operatic music playing while they're fighting. Duel of the Fates is one of the best cinematic scores ever written. John Williams needs a huge shout out for doing all the scores for all these movies. The end fight between them with Duel of the Fates playing is some of the most epic cinema you're going to see, and it's the reason I have it here at number 5. All right, number 4, I got Episode 4, A New Hope. Now, this movie obviously is like cinematic history. It's the one that kicked it all off. George, I think, is a genius for thinking of this back in 1977. He had to work out all these deals to get this made, to get the money for it made, because people at the time were like, you want to have a walking dog in space? Like, this is just genius. Darth Vader is the greatest cinematic villain ever created. They thought this was going to be a flop too. They let George have the toy rights for this. And you know how much money he made? He probably made more money off the toys than he did the actual movies. That's how little they believed in this movie. And George, you just gotta give him props for putting this together and creating a franchise that we still talk about now in 2023. All right, we're into the top 3. It's a trap. Return of the Jedi. This, I think, is a really good movie. It's a really good end to the original trilogy. I will say with this one, I find the beginning and the end to be a lot stronger than the middle. I think the stuff at Jabba's palace, honestly, is the best stuff in the movie. Like the whole thing about rescuing Han, you got the Sarlacc pit and everything. I think that part is really, really strong. I think the end part with the Emperor, and Darth Vader and Luke in the throne room having kind of just a battle of ideologies, I think that's really strong. I don't hate the stuff with the Ewoks. It's just not my favorite part of the movie. And I think that it wraps up really well. You got Admiral Akbar in there, who they just threw away in Last Jedi, which is really stupid. But yeah, so the Jabba's palace stuff is great. Wrapped up the original trilogy well. A lot of things I like about this movie. Luke with the green lightsaber is really cool. Fighting Darth Vader, redeeming his father. That's another thing. You redeem the bad guy, which they kind of stole in Rise of Skywalker. But yeah, I really like Return of the Jedi. Lands at number 3 on my list. All right, so number 2. This is where we might have a little bit of debates here with some switchery we're doing. I'm going to do number 2, Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back. This is the greatest sequel ever made. It contains the greatest spoiler/plot twist in movie history that has been just passed. People that probably have never seen Star Wars know that Darth Vader is Luke's father. That's genius. I think that the stuff on Hoth is really good with the AT-AT walkers and escaping from there. It's very interesting. Then you have Luke split off from the rest of the group and they're on the run from the Empire. You have him go meet Yoda, who is another just all-time cinema character that they introduce, who portrays himself as like a crazy old frog, but then really is just this Jedi master who has all this knowledge. Do or do not, there is no try. The stuff with the Vader and Luke at the end where he's not ready to fight him, but he fights him anyway. The Imperial March is also introduced in this movie. Great job again by John Williams. He's just a genius. So Empire Strikes Back, all-time classic, probably one of the best movies ever made, is at number 2 on my list. Which leads to number 1, which is Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Now, I can admit that cinema history-wise, Empire Strikes Back has more of a place in history. It's probably a better movie, but Revenge of the Sith is awesome. Like, you go to like the last hour of this movie, and you have Obi-Wan versus Grievous, you have Mace Windu versus the Emperor, you have Yoda versus the Emperor, you have Obi-Wan versus Anakin at the end, which is awesome, with Battle of Heroes playing. Again, John Williams, awesome job. Then you have Order 66, which is just genius storytelling. George had a plan with the prequels, which was not present in the sequels, as I've said. But he had this plan where the Emperor was going to play both sides of the war, manipulating both of them into basically leading up to Order 66, where he took out everyone and he's in control. And he took over the Senate. He took over the entire galaxy just by himself with all these mind games. And it's just genius, the fact that George could put that together and have these ideas. Revenge of the Sith is awesome. It is a great movie. It's my favorite Star Wars movie. You can watch it anytime, and I think just sit there and just be like, oh, this is so cool, this is so cool, this is so cool. There's 8 different this is so cool moments in this movie. When Mace Windu beat the Emperor, it was over, and then Anakin chopped off his hand, they zapped him out the window. Crazy. And then the whole fight between Anakin and Obi-Wan at the end, the cinematography, or the choreography, I guess, of it is just great. Obi-Wan didn't want to have to fight him. He didn't want to have to take down Anakin. And then that's how Darth Vader comes to be. And I just think that George knocked it out of the park with this one. You can say what you want about the prequels, but I think they're epic. And I think that the music in them is great. And I just think that Star Wars is the greatest story ever told. So that's how I rank all the live-action Star Wars movies we've had so far. What do you think about my list? Am I stupid? Let me know in the comment section below what your favorite Star Wars movies are. And thanks again for watching the video. If you guys would, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate it. And I'll see you back next time with another review.